Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Malena Edit. I am really excited to be joined today by Crissy Froyd, currently still a student, but manages to be a managing editor for the Tennessee Titans and LSU division of USA Today, a writer and contributor to the Draft Network, and so much more that we'll jump into through this interview. Thank you so much for joining me, Crissy.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So what I want to start with, how did you get your start in journalism? Why did you know this was going to be the right path for you?
So actually, I started my career off in showing dogs. I had absolutely not the slightest idea that I would ever be interested in journalism. I took journalism as an elective in high school, hated it, thought it was the stupidest class ever. And then I had this 8-page essay that I had to write for, I want to say, it was English class and junior year. I graduated a year early from high school.
Cool.
And it was an 8-page essay on anything that you wanted, essentially. And so I went to a Titans game, noticed everyone was talking badly about Zach Mettenberger. And I was like, well, I know a good deal about football. I don't know a ton about football, but logic tells me that it can't be all this guy's fault. And so I was like, well, let me research this. Let me look into it a little bit further. And before I knew it, I was super caught up into it. And then after I submitted it, my teacher was like, have you thought about going into sports journalism? And then at that point, I wrote a couple other things for my portfolio. And then I put them in submissions for a bunch of different outlets working for free, essentially. And then I got some gigs there. And then essentially the rest is history. My first paid gig was with USA Today Sports Media Group as the managing editor of the Titans division when I was 18. So I called my waitress job in the morning and I quit. And it was the most freeing feeling ever. And I have worked every single day of my life since then with no off days. But it's been busy, but it's been a really great experience. And then I've obviously been super quarterback focused since then. And I think I have a total of 21 guys I'm working with. And by working with, I mean just covering and interview stories and stuff like that. This offseason, I had 7 last year. So it's really a huge jump.
That's so epic. That's so cool. I love it all. And I mean, I'm sure not having a day off is easy when you love what you're doing and enjoy what you're covering. So that's pretty cool. I noticed I did a little research on you and I saw that you're a Houston native. So
Yes.
How did you end up choosing LSU? Of all the schools in the Southwest region, you could have gone in any direction here. How was LSU the right choice for you?
Honestly, I mean, I didn't want to go to college at first because I still thought that I wanted to show dogs when I graduated high school. My parents convinced me to, so I started off at Lone Star Community College in the Houston area. And then I was covering LSU remotely because I was first just covering the Titans remotely. And then I decided to start covering LSU, honestly, because the first guy that I knew anything at all about in depth was Zach Mettenberger. And whenever you start researching a quarterback, you start researching the quarterbacks before him at his college, trying to find background. How did the scheme change? How did the coaches change? Yada, yada, yada. And so before I knew it, I thought that I had a pretty decent knowledge base on that. And so I started covering LSU remotely as well. And then I got into the recruiting side of it a good bit, had a lot of guys from Texas come over there. So I interviewed a lot of them. And then before I knew it, I kind of had built this network of a bunch of LSU people. And then I also wanted to go just kind of take a guess at whatever program was going to be super successful in the time that I was there. And I was like, right, we're going to bet on this one. I've got a lot of connections here. And sure enough, they won the national championship after that 2019 season. And obviously a bit upsetting with the things that are going on here right now with the Title IX investigation, all that other stuff. But I've accomplished a lot just by being in this area. And I don't think that I would have really pushed myself to be in the position to cover some of these things if I didn't choose to come to this area.
One, I love that you highlight the importance of what is happening there outside of the team successes, being a woman in the sport and recognizing so many of the things that happen on the back end is extremely important. We almost scream the success and kind of quietly mention the other things. But that being said, I do wonder too, having been at the school while they were going through all of these massive successes and being there in their natty year, undefeated season, the entire Joe Burrow story, what a perfect time for you to land there. Will anything beat that experience for you, one? And how was that coverage for you? I guess you were in your junior year. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's funny because like I mentioned, I started out covering an LSU quarterback, like just totally quarterback LSU based, like as narrow as it gets. And so to have one of the greatest college football players of all time come through the program, and for me to be, I mean, LSU has never really been known for great quarterbacks either before that point. It had been a really long time before they'd had one of note before him. And so he kind of like fell into my lap at just the right time. And I was ahead of the game and covering him because I was already quarterback focused. So before I even got here, I was talking to people. I was talking to his former coaches, like a bunch of people that were super easy to get a hold of at that time and didn't have a lot of media demands on them because nobody knew what Joe Burrow was going to be. He was just some guy coming off the bench. So that was a really great opportunity to get the jump on that and to have really just kind of covered him from beginning to end, of him coming off the bench to him going number 1 overall in the 2020 NFL draft. But yeah, I mean, I always expected that LSU would lose to Alabama at some point in there, or that it would all eventually come,
right,
not like crashing down, but that it would, get 2 or 3 losses somewhere in there. But I'd say about halfway through the Alabama game, and then after winning the Alabama game, you just knew there was this feeling of being there and being on the ground that you just knew in your gut that this team was not going to lose. Like I'd say after the Alabama game, I just knew they were going to go all the way. You could feel it. It was the energy in the building. But yeah, I think it's unrivaled, that experience. And then traveling, and I mean, I traveled and went to every single game on the ground that season. And so I think back to it, and it's just this magical, like, it's like Christmas time. It was like Christmas time the whole year round is what it felt like being there. And so this season, obviously, between COVID and everything, it was just the total opposite, because in a way I was like, I can't wait for this to be over. Like, it's miserable. You go and you sit there in the press box and you can't really go down there. You don't get to connect with the players. And then LSU, just for lack of better words, was just extremely lackluster this year. So they made some changes, though. I think they're trying to kind of go back to that Joe Brady era. So I'm curious to see how they do this year.
That's yeah, it's good thing to note, but I think it's exciting too that because you have that kind of season, you got to live through it and experience it, the perfect alignment of you being there at the right time. Even if you guys literally went 0 and whatever this year, it would probably you still get those memories. You cannot pass on that. That's so cool. And then I was going to ask you that too, the change in covering the SEC this past season. But you did touch on that, and I'm curious. I do see other SEC schools covered on your Twitter feed and everything like that. How focused are you on LSU, and then obviously quarterback focus? So is that how you end up touching some of the other schools in the conference?
Yeah, I really do like to expand beyond just LSU, because I like to cover the whole SEC, because at some point LSU is going to play that team. At some point, the fans are going to want to know the opposing players. You can understand the game better. You understand what the other players, what the other team brings to the table so much more in depth. And I like covering the SEC in general. I think a lot of people will notice that I do a lot of Mississippi State coverage. That's kind of just this connection that just came about, really. Like, I covered one quarterback there, and now I've directly worked with like 4 or 5 at this point. So it's just kind of, it's almost, and at this point, it's almost become like a streak to me or something. And I don't want to lose it. It's like become this weird personal thing, because I adapt to change well, but I don't like change. And this has become like a sense of continuity to me. And then after I worked with Anthony Gordon and the last draft, because he was a potential Titans draft prospect, I wish that they would have given him a chance. I think that he just has so much potential still. But Mike Leach was his head coach at Wazoo. And so I talked to him, and he's a very, very personable guy. And in studying Anthony for so long, after a while, I was like, I really like this offense. I have a lot of appreciation for it. There's so much just, I guess, lore, for lack of better words, that surrounds it. Just so much. A lot of people talk about the air raid offense and the philosophy and the culture and everything around it. And I was curious, and I wanted to find out more. And then I also got this feeling that I was like, if I'm selling myself as an analyst and doing all these analytical reports, then people need to have a reason to trust me. And that's not saying that I discredit myself or discredit any other analyst just because they didn't play football. But I kind of sat there and thought about it. I was like, like I can, while it's annoying to me as a reporter to hear it, these coaches and these players, they play this game, and there are these people that are out there that are saying, oh, they should do this differently. We don't like this about them, or, oh, they're not doing well right now. And they're on the outside, and perhaps they've never played or even in depth studied football in their life. And I can see how that comes across as a slap in the face. And so I knew that I would be better for studying that offense. And so I began to, and I eventually got certified through the course that's run by Hal Mumme, who founded that offense. And I feel like I understand things so much better. I feel like I have so much more fun watching Mississippi State and watching all those teams that run that offense. And I've just developed an appreciation and really consider it to be the best way to do it. And as far as the quarterbacks in general, so that's kind of the Mississippi State connection. Now, then I went to Mississippi State. And so that's a different story as far as my involvement kind of there right now and the offense and all of that. But as far as quarterbacks go, I always wanted to be quarterback focused. I felt like I had started that way. I felt like it's what I knew the most. And then this offseason, the Draft Network brought me on. And so I had the quarterback series there of, I'd say, about 8 or 9 guys that I was assigned to. And I worked with all them. And then I do all the potential Titans draft prospects, which, I mean, there's always, as long as Logan Woodside is like the only other guy, they're always going to have another like backup guy to bring on. Right. And so he's always going to have competition in that sense. So basically any lower round undrafted free agent kind of quarterback prospect you can work on. So I take advantage of that for whatever guys are not listed. And then Pro Football Network, I've done some too. So like I said, now we're going to be by draft day between 21 and 23 quarterbacks. And I think that the only 2 in this year's draft class that I will not have worked with are Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, because Justin Fields, somebody else with our network was doing. And Trevor Lawrence, I contacted his agent, and we were never really able to get anything going. But whenever you have a guy that's number 1 overall projected like that, anyone in this industry knows it is very, very hard to get a hold of them, especially if you haven't previously worked with them.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting too, that you work with the Titans, and your mention of the connection there, working with the Titans and then needing to always kind of know who they could potentially be in the running for as a backup there, because it gives you like that range of depth. I'm sure it's challenging learning about 21 names in a draft class. And, there's so much buzz about the top 5, but for you to have so much knowledge about those guys that 3 years from now we might hear are getting a start, that's super cool. And I'll know who to turn to and say, what do I expect from this guy who's starting on Sunday nobody knows about? So I love to hear that. And your mention of your air raid certification, the first woman to become air raid certified, I am in complete awe and admiration of that. What made you make that choice? You mentioned that, wanting to proof on paper, right? Maybe I didn't play the sport, but I have knowledge of the game. And what else kind of brought you to making that decision? Was it working with Anthony Gordon at Mississippi State that kind of checked that final box for you?
Yeah, Anthony Gordon was actually coming out of Wazoo at that point, and then Mike was transitioning to Mississippi State. So it was kind of, and it was during COVID. So it was kind of just, the whole thing was just during a weird time. But yeah, I mean, I also cover high school. I've covered everything: high school football, NFL, college, Alliance of American Football, XFL, 7-on-7, you name it. But yeah, so between being down there for the high school and the 7-on-7 and stuff like that, I really liked being down there and kind of feeling like I was more a part of the team. And I've always loved the analytics and the X's and O's of all of this. And so you reach a certain point in journalism and film analysis and stuff when you simply have kind of hit the wall. You're there, you've done all you can do. Like the only next step is literally to go play football or to coach football. And so I thought that I would want to be more involved with getting down there. And I wanted to be more of a part of that energy. And I wanted to be able, it was weird because whenever I'd watch games, I'd always have this thing where I was like, I want like this weird like urge to literally move the players around and like put them in different formations just to see it would happen. I was like, I want to have the power to do that, and not only the power to do it, but the ability to do it. Mm-hmm. And I also know that journalism can be a shaky industry. And as long as we have sports and sports journalism and just that whole industry exists, the sport itself will always be there. So no matter how bad the journalism industry gets, no matter how bad the layoffs are, we'll at least still have football. Right. And so I kind of viewed it as both a fallback plan and then something that I wanted to try concurrently with journalism, that maybe I could figure out which one that I would end up liking more. And so, I mean, coaching is something that I really do want to go into. I've been in contact with a few people about potentially getting on with an entry-level position, because I mean, I'm proud of what I've accomplished with the air raid certification. I think that I've learned a lot. I think that I'm definitely in a place where I can begin applying it, but at the same time, like, it's just the foundation. It's just the beginning. If you don't get out here and apply this stuff and really rep it, I mentally rep it in my head. I draw it out and force myself to remember and kind of visualize it. Because right now I kind of have guinea pigs. I don't totally have guinea pigs. I don't have my own team to work with yet. That's something that we're hoping will be in the making with these positions that I'm looking into right now. But if you don't utilize it and you don't put it into practice, then you're going, just like anything else you learn, you're going to end up losing it. And I would like to, I mean, I'm the kind of person that likes to finish what I start. And so I do want to go out there and I do want to get involved in coaching, and I want to see just kind of how it'll work out. And there's a lot of people, I think, that whenever you get started in something like this, there's a lot of people that have come to me and they're like, well, like, I think you should go ahead and pick something now, like just pick out one of those two things and pursue it. Well, I've been in journalism for 6 years now. It's my primary source of income. And I'm fully aware that while I do bring a lot to the table and while I do understand this offense, there's still going to be a bit of a learning curve. And it's one thing to know an offense and another to be able to really implement it and to literally to be the coach. And so there's some things that I'm still going to have to work out just from that aspect. And so my hope is that I can work remotely in journalism with a position that pays me enough, and then that I will go and try coaching out. And I mean, I have the playbooks, I have stuff that I've gone over. So I'm putting in the time, I'm putting in the effort, and I think that it's something that I can be successful in. But like I said, like, I'm going to have to do both concurrently for at least a little while, but I'm excited to see where it goes. And I'm excited to hopefully bring some air raid concepts just to a high school somewhere in the country.
I just want to like bottle that energy. I love the idea of like both ends. Like, no, I do not have to do one thing. So I completely second that. And I can totally see it happening for you. I already love that you are relentless in the idea of, no, I can do this. And here's a vision of how I can make it play out.
Yeah.
So awesome. Love, like, oh, I just love that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that goodness, the lawn people are just crazy right now. But anyways,
I can't hear it. You're good.
You can't hear it? Okay.
No.
But yeah, so I mean, I've worked multiple gigs in sports for so long. Like, I think that I've had no less than 4 jobs concurrently in journalism at the same time. So anything that I go on to do from a journalistic aspect after college will be a complete cut down. I would estimate that I'd be doing somewhere roughly between 30 and 50% of what I do now, because like I tell people, I literally could not be any more busy than I am right now.
And couple that with also being a full-time student.
Yes. Graduating.
Right. Yeah.
It's a job. That's a job in itself.
Yes, absolutely. I cannot forget. So I feel like maybe the lines blur too when I'm watching different systems and different teams. So I know what the air raid offense is, and I know it's popular in the Big 12. I know Cliff Kingsbury ran it, Sonny Dykes. What is a pure air raid offense by definition? Like, if I'm looking at it in its purest form.
Well, I think the air raid is more of a philosophy and an idea as opposed to just a scheme. We run a lot of stuff with verticals. I mean, that's we try to throw it downfield. But the other thing is that there's a lot of dinking and dunking, and it's based on repetition. It's based on execution. And in theory, if you can execute well enough, there's no defense that is going to be strong enough to cover everyone. There will always be a man open. And that's the thing that I love about it. And whenever we go into these press conferences and everything, I mean, you hear people say, oh, we didn't execute well enough. And everything comes down to execution. And this is an offense that is so focused on that repetition and that execution. So if you have the right players for it, it's going to work for you every single time. And if one thing doesn't work, one of the things that we say is play the next play. You just forget about it. It happened. Go on to the next play. So I like the mentality that surrounds it, and I like the fact that every play you're going to have someone that's going to be open, so long as everyone does their job and so long as everyone executes. So it's a very simple offense that's obviously based on the passing game. There are some run plays in there, but I mean, it's just obviously not what we're known for. It's not what the scheme is known for. But that's the thing that I feel like a lot of people get mixed up, is that they're like, they literally never run the ball. Well, yeah, we don't do it often. We almost never do. But we do have the ability to utilize the running back, and there's 30 draw plays like that in there.
Nice. Sounds like my kind of. I mean, I love to watch it. I think back to
I like the just the fearless attack. It's the trust that everybody's going to do their job. And that's what it comes down to. To me, that's what football comes down to. And as Mike will tell you, I mean, really, this is the best way to do it. I suppose it's not the only way to do it. If it was the only way to do it, then the teams would never win that didn't do it. But yeah, no, like I said, I think it comes down to a lot of execution. I like the fact that it's based to getting the ball out to as many guys as possible, as opposed to just one playmaker. So you lose kind of some predictability in there too, I think.
Sounds exciting. My kind of football to watch. I love that. And do you think it's changed then, since its creation in 1989, changed much of the game that we see today? I know I often hear this is now, the game on Saturdays is now becoming what we see on Sundays. And there's not really a pro style offense as much anymore, because the NFL is pulling from those concepts, and you're seeing these freak athletes like the combination of Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. And so it just kind of makes sense in matches. How much do you think it's impacted the game itself, and how is it changing the scope of the NFL?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that concepts of the air raid are present in just about every single offense that we see today. I mean, you see a lot of teams that use the mesh concept. There's a lot of different, 6 is one of our plays that I see a lot of people run some form of. Basically especially high schools, almost every high school runs a spread and has several different concepts from the air raid within it. I think, Cliff Kingsbury is implementing it there with the Arizona Cardinals, closest, to its purest form. But I think that even though we don't necessarily see a ton of teams that run purely the air raid, there are concepts of it in just about every single level of football, to the point that it's just become commonplace. It's one of those offensive schemes where certain aspects of it are just, like I said, commonplace in just about every team. And I think that's really just neat how it's expanded to everywhere. And even though if you don't technically run the air raid offense and you implement a bunch of other stuff to go along with those concepts, just about every team is going to want to pull at least something from it.
Right. Cool. That is so awesome. I can't wait to hear more about what you continue to do with the certification. I'll probably be DMing you if I have any questions through the season.
Yeah.
If I see some of those different concepts. That's still kudos. Congratulations on being the first woman. Again, that's air raid certified. Epic stuff. And I want to shift back into a little bit more quarterback talk. I know that we talked about your quarterback focus. How did you choose that area outside of, I can't remember the quarterback from LSU that you said you first started working with. How did that come about? The decision, I guess, to go, all right, I think I'm going to be primarily QB focused.
Yeah, it was just the fact that I felt like I got really good at it really quickly. And I think with an industry that's so broad, it's important to build a brand, and it's important to get really, really good at least one small aspect of it, because that becomes what you're known for. And you're not essentially just like everybody else. Like forgive me if there's someone else out here doing this, but I haven't found anyone else who is quarterback focused like I am. Like I haven't found anyone else who's got, like I said, I have somewhere around ballpark 20 this year that I've worked with. Right. And I haven't found anyone that's even come close to that number. And quite frankly, I haven't found anybody that's even really looking beyond top maybe seven or so. Yeah. So I feel comfortable in it. I feel like it's something that I know a lot about, something I've been able to expand connections on. And so journalistically speaking, I'm going to stay in quarterbacks as long as it works. And so far it's worked out well, and it's been nothing but upward momentum.
Love that. So speaking of those top 7, First question I have for you, who are your top 5 in order in this year's 2021 draft class? We're hearing so much now. Names are just meshing and crossing and everybody's switching up their positions. But what do you think? I want to hear from the quarterback girl herself.
Yeah, so Zach Wilson, I was the first person to put Zach Wilson above Trevor Lawrence. There's just a hair to me that separates them. The only things that I don't really like about Trevor Lawrence is sometimes he'll lock on to a receiver. And just, I mean, outside of that, I mean, there's really that it's just so close. Right. But I like the way that Zach has the ability to go off script. I think that his mental processing is amazing, and his footwork in the pocket probably the best in this entire draft. Yeah. He brings some good mobility. I feel like a lot of people don't really recognize how much adversity he's actually faced with all the injuries he's had in his career that he's worked to come back from. And I mean, I talked to his dad a bit, and I mean, during COVID, it's still COVID, but I'm talking about like COVID.
Yeah.
he was driving from Utah to California to work with John Beck, like 10 hour drive, like on the weekends just to get extra work in. So he has a tremendous amount of dedication. And the other thing that we touched on is he said ever since he was like 7 or 8 years old, he had recognized this ability that he had to mimic things. Like he would watch these basketball videos and go out and with this little like basketball thing that he had, and he would perfectly replicate it every single time. And what I'm getting at there is he does the same thing with the film he watches. He watches guys like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. And if you look at the comparisons and just all the comps that are out there for Zach Wilson, they're all guys with those type of names. Yeah. And it's because he's literally, I don't know how he does it. His dad told me he doesn't know how he does it either, but he has the ability to watch something and to literally replicate it, which I think it's almost unheard of, at least nothing I've ever heard of. And it's so important because, I mean, what can't you do whenever you have a guy that can watch something and can literally make it happen with his own body? Right. So I tell people, I think that Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence both check a lot of boxes, but perhaps Zach Wilson checks half a box more for me, and he ends up having the better career in the long term. And that's just something that I truly believe. Mac Jones is also a guy that's in my top 5. I'm trying to think. Trey Lance, and then there's one. I'm forgetting the exact
Justin
order.
Fields.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so busy it leaves my head. Yeah,
I can imagine you have the depth there.
Yeah, it goes Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones. And Trey Lance to me is, I mean, he's kind of a wild card just because we haven't seen as much of him as we've seen as some of these other guys. And he had the 1 game season, but he started off playing defense and offense at the same time, as in like they say that he plays with a linebacker mentality. So I think he's a very powerful runner, and I think he's a lot better passer than he gets credit for. I don't think he's ever been considered a bad passer, but I think that the film will show you he's a lot more accurate than even the numbers will reflect. And then Mac Jones, the thing that we talk about with him is that him and Tua Tagovailoa, 2 totally different quarterbacks, but they're pretty much put on the spectrum, like the same end of the spectrum as far as success goes. And a source at Alabama told me that he thinks that for Tua, a lot of this stuff, they have a lot of the same traits outside of the freak mobility, that thing that's Tua's all the way. But as far as accuracy and quickness and all that stuff goes, for Tua, it's more of a natural ability. For Mac, it's more of a learned thing. It's more of a mental thing for him. So I think outside of the mobility aspect, that's the main difference between those two, but they're both equally successful in my eyes. So yeah, and then Justin Fields, I think, goodness gracious, you couldn't have asked for a better pro day out of him.
Yeah.
I think that he's even faster than I originally gave him credit for. And I think that he's really bounced all over that top 4, and we've seen a lot more moving and shaking as far as that goes, but I'm excited to see what he does as well. I think he brings a lot to the table, both as a passer and certainly as an athlete.
That is so cool. Your insights are so amazing. I can see that you have that quarterback focus. And it's so amazing. Like, I feel like more people need to be like pulling from so much of what you're taking away, because when you mention like Zach Wilson being able to kind of like see something, essentially like photographic memory, and then copy paste. That makes sense to me when I watch his game. Just like you mentioned, Trey Lance playing like a linebacker mentality at quarterback. That was an incredible way of wording it, because I see that in his game. I just remember like watching him and writing and constantly thinking, I love the way he runs. But you could say that about a lot of people. Oh, okay, Lamar Jackson runs and Patrick Mahomes runs. But
Yeah.
you saying that, just I had like a light bulb moment. Love that. Your insight is really incredible. I very much mean that. So my other question for you that I learned from then this interview, you're focusing on so much depth. Do you have like one or two of these like sneaky names that I should not be overlooking? Because I know the top 5 and maybe even 6, but who are one or two guys that you're just like, don't forget about him. Don't sleep on this.
This is my favorite question ever. Oh my gosh, I love this question. So Ian Book is someone that I feel like was kind of in the early Heisman talks, never really taken seriously. I did have a little bit of inconsistency there at Notre Dame. So whenever I was going to the Senior Bowl, the things that I wanted to see from him were just his accuracy on display as a passer. And then another thing is that I feel like people get mobility and the ability to evade pressure confused. So there are some quarterbacks that, I mean, they kind of put on a show because they do all this stuff trying to move around and evade pressure. And it looks like they're just running all over the place. And in reality, he's getting you maybe 2 or 3 yards, but it looks like it's fun to watch. It looks like he's really doing a whole lot. It looks like he's really shifty and nimble, and it's just this whole to-do. But mobility, I mean, you go and you find running lanes, you pick up some significant yardage for your team. And so that's what I saw from Ian Book, particularly on the 3rd day of practice. I think that he did it at least 3 times. I used to have it written down somewhere. I can't find it anymore. But the other thing I noticed, he was beautifully accurate as a passer, one of the most accurate passers of the day. And even though he's kind of a guy that we look at as undersized, I looked at him and I was like, this is someone that I hold in a much higher regard than I used to. And I'm so happy that I came to go watch him. The other one that I think a lot of people have noticed I've done a good bit of work on is KJ Costello. Before this season, he was my number 1 quarterback. And there were a lot of the mock drafts that had him like somewhere around the 1st round. And then, of course, he had that super great game against LSU. I think that a lot of that was reflective of his abilities. I think the thing that people don't realize, though, is they look at that performance and they go, oh, well, LSU secondary was having a bad day. They're without Derek Stingley. Well, yeah, but I mean, if you look through there are missed opportunities by the receivers within there. And then you watch the offensive line and their performance could have been much better. And then you have the center snapping the ball in his face, above his head. So, I mean, it was not without adversity that he accomplished those 623 passing yards. I believe 5 touchdowns, set the SEC record. Wow. And going into that season, I mean, Mississippi State used to be a power running team. And so you take the air raid, which is the total opposite of that offense. You hardly have an offseason to install it. Yeah. A lot of your players that are there are used to running that power running scheme. And so KJ Costello has a very, very hard job to do. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. I think the execution could have been better. I think that everybody just kind of needed more time to really get better within that offense. And they didn't have the time that they needed to. And so, and then there were the injuries, the head injury that Costello had, and then the COVID exposure. And so at that point, I think he was out like 4 weeks. So he's totally discombobulated, even if they were going to put him back in there. So I just think that 10-game SEC only schedule, transfer quarterback, implementing that new offense, also probably the second youngest team in the SEC. Like I said, KJ Costello has a very, very hard job to do in that situation. I don't think it's reflective of his abilities. I elaborated a lot upon this in the feature story and the breakdown that I published to USA Today. So that's someone, he had a fantastic pro day. I also posted that on my Twitter, but I'm just hoping that somebody will give him more of a fair look, because I think that he's someone who, if given the proper chance, if a team will take a chance on him, I think he could really do well.
Love that. Those are going to be 2 names that I just keep in my back pocket. And I like that you said that you kind of moved up a little bit on Ian Book, because I didn't know how to feel about him by the end of the season. Like, I wanted to like him, but I couldn't really quite figure out what it was that I wasn't especially excited about. So I like your insight there. And now I'm going to have to look into him more again, maybe go back and give him that second look for sure. And then I want to wrap up with a couple questions from LSU's Pro Day, which on the national stage was so focused on Jamar Chase. And I get why. He is the epic talent and has all the measurables, check, check, check every box. But what do you think we should be expecting from a guy like Terrace Marshall?
Yeah, I think that Terrace, I thought Terrace had a good pro day. And I think that what it all comes down to is like he opted out in this season. Every player has different reasons for that, and I don't blame any of them.
Mhm.
And then ahead of this season, you had the two-headed snake. I mean, you have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and it simply doesn't get any better than those two. And so I almost kind of compare it to the quarterback room at Ohio State. Well, they thought they had some really good guys in there, so they're not starting Joe Burrow, but look at how good Joe Burrow is.
Right.
And so with Terrace Marshall, I don't know that I'm going to sell him that high just based off of the small sample size.
Right.
But I think that Terrace Marshall is probably just as good or somewhere in the same range as those two guys. But those two are just so good and they're out there and they're showing out that you don't need that third guy, really.
Yeah.
So I think that he brings a lot to an NFL team. I think that he definitely deserves to go in the first round. I think after that pro day, he's solidified his place in the first round because we've seen him kind of bouncing around the first round and the second round. But yeah, I mean, I think that he's a lot closer to those two guys than people give him credit for. And perhaps if we had a way just to see more of them in college, if it would have worked out that way, I think that would be a popular opinion. I think it's already becoming more of a popular opinion that he does belong in the first round, though. So I'm happy for that.
I'm interested. What would you kind of liken it to a little bit? How we were so like distracted by DK Metcalf that we like AJ Brown low key flew under the radar a little bit there. Is like a similar type of feel, and he could pop off in the league on the right team and in the right system.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. And I think it's been interesting because Corey Davis at one time was WR1 for the Titans. And I think that he kind of came back to showing us what his ceiling could be this year. But AJ Brown, I mean, he just absolutely has become a playmaker in that offense, probably the most important target that Ryan Tannehill has at this point.
Right. Like I could see that happening. We're like, now we're talking about AJ Brown, like, oh, he was that other guy from Ole Miss that year. Did you guys forget about him? Like we might be saying that about Terrace when he finds the right fit. Like, oh yeah, you guys know his two other teammates, but this guy was a part of that too. That's funny. And my final question, so we focused so much on offense, but I have one quick defensive question. And I saw you do a write-up on this guy. Defense focused for LSU are the two big names that are coming to mind for me. Jabril Cox, who wasn't able to test on pro day, but Jacoby Stevens was. And it seems like it was a stock up day for him. Why was it such a big day for him? And do you have any additional thoughts on him as a player?
Based on the things he was saying on Twitter and based on some of the things that I saw, it seemed like some people were kind of had this idea that he didn't have this big sense of athletic ability, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I think that the numbers he posted showed that he indeed did. And so that did a lot for him, just as far as public perception and for his draft stock as well. And just with him, I think a lot of people who aren't close to here don't realize just how big of a leadership figure he was in that locker room. I'd say that maybe it was Joe Burrow before, but after Joe Burrow left, I heard a lot. There was probably no player I heard more of as far as being a leader than Jacoby Stevens. He's one of the most important defensive playmakers that we had here in Baton Rouge. And then Jabril Cox, one thing he and I talked about were how all these kids at the FCS level, they don't necessarily get the same amount of publicity. And he told me that I think there are a lot of hidden gems there. And he was able to come over to LSU this year, and it did a lot for his stats in general. I think it did a lot for him as a player in general. And I think that it's part of the reason why he was able to get discovered even more than he was already being discovered. I think it's kind of sucks that he wasn't able to get out there and show what he could do on pro day, but I think that he had a really good showing at the Senior Bowl, and I'm looking for him to get drafted at a pretty decent position as well.
That's so cool. And I did read that. And it stood out to me for sure. I did read your article on USA Today about Jabril Cox, and that was the biggest standout, that the lower tier, not Power 5 schools. Yeah. Like how much talent are we really missing? How many guys are out there that could actually for sure be playing at the next level? But I'm sure hopefully the process kind of gets refined more as we continue to go along and we start to give those hidden gems a chance too. Crissy, this was the It's such an exciting interview. One, I'm inspired. I'm like, I need to go get about 10 more certifications under me. I feel like you are just going to be a complete rock star. I'm so intrigued by what you're doing. I can't wait to continue watching your path. It is so cool. I can't say it enough. I don't think I could like give you enough praise or accolades.
Thank you.
But congrats. Good job. Keep going. Can't wait to see it continue. And thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.